All right. It looks like we're now live. We will just give everybody a chance to come on in. We are about ready to welcome Ajit to the stage. Ajit is the head of institutional business at Aave, and he will be speaking about real estate backed tokens as collateral. Please take the stage, Ajit.
Yeah, hi, Mete. Thanks for inviting us to, talk about decentralized finance and real estate tokens, real estate backed tokens as collateral in decentralized finance. I chose not to bring a PowerPoint because I think in the institutional side we sit through PowerPoints all day, and I thought it we we see so many PowerPoints and they're all fungible rather than non-fungible, and after a while they all look the same. I mean, instead of doing that, I think if we can make this session more interactive and more of a Q&A as much as possible, that'll be great. So I'll start by
I think
introducing
it's a,
Aave first
it's a
of all.
very good idea.
Yeah. So and it's a wonderful day in crypto markets. We are Bitcoin was down 44% out of nowhere. And thank you, Elon. Thank you, Elon Musk. Maybe you're using, you will have a lot of real estate on Mars. But hey, uh, so um, yeah, but I think we're still in a very bullish macro environment. So I'm really looking forward to what happens in the next 12 to 24 months. Now, just to introduce myself, I currently lead institutional business at Aave. Prior to this, I was, consulting with Binance and Paxful, and before that, I was with Consensus, where I was building out the fintech practice globally, along with a couple of others. And my background is in capital markets technology at Goldman, Barclays, Credit Suisse, and UBS. I've done a bunch of regulatory change, risk management, and compliance work, in addition to technology across front, middle, and back office. So that's quite a useful context for where we are at with DeFi and where we're going. So decentralized finance, just to introduce very briefly, is about peer to protocol or peer to peer public blockchain based applications that are governed by decentralized autonomous organizations or token holder governance. So the decentralization aspect is extremely important. And then it's essentially a new way of building more efficient, automated, and transparent financial services on the public Ethereum and public other public blockchains in the shape of smart contracts. And mostly decentralized finance today uses crypto assets. So Aave, for example, is one of the world's best known DeFi protocols. Aave essentially allows people to borrow and lend or rather deposit assets into a smart contract, with what's known as a market or a pool, and then other users can essentially borrow from this pool. So it's peer to protocol, peer to smart contract to peer architecture, which is kind of similar to some of the other major DeFi protocols like Uniswap and others use, where you essentially provide liquidity in a particular asset or assets to a smart contract, and other people essentially, other users can interact with the smart contract through their crypto wallets. Now, Aave is essentially a liquidity protocol, which means it's provides quite a foundational utility to the rest of the DeFi ecosystem by enabling liquidity, right? So if somebody has excess Bitcoin, they can deposit Bitcoin into Aave, and somebody has excess stable coins, they can deposit excess stable coins. So if someone borrows stable coins, they essentially pay the interest to the person who has deposited, right? So the depositor or the lender earns interest, and that interest is paid by the borrower, right? So it's a very efficient peer to protocol architecture, where multiple people are interacting with the smart contract on one side of liquidity, and then other multiple people are interacting with smart contracts on the other side of liquidity, right? So it creates a bit of a clearing system for credit, for liquidity. And with this level of automation, the efficiencies are quite large, right? So there are very large efficiencies. There's no paperwork involved. It's all incredibly automated, and it's also transparent. So traditionally in finance, you have banks, you have lots of people like who make decisions behind closed doors and whatnot, whereas DeFi is open source, everything is in software, and you can see exactly what's going on. So there is technology teams that run analytics and so on. So transparency, automation, and efficiency are the three major benefits of DeFi. Now, So there is this idea of so tokenization has been around, right? So I mean, I've worked on security tokens. One of the first NFT or non-fungible projects that I did at Consensus with Her Majesty's Land Registry, and we talk about NFTs all the time. But it turns out, the most valuable NFTs are actually real estate tokens. So, and the reason, every property is unique. A land title is unique, and this uniqueness of property makes it non-fungible, right? So you can obviously fractionalize a land title or a claim on a land title into fungible tokens, and that you can securitize property in a pool and things like that. So there are fungible tokens that can be created off the back of non-fungible tokens, but fundamentally real estate tokens are non-fungible, right? And so in DeFi today, so Aave has been working on essentially using NFTs, and right now those NFTs are going to be more like digital art and sort of still digital native tokens. But in the future, that opens the doors for so that more real world NFTs to be integrated into DeFi. Now. So a couple of concepts, right? To get out of the way, what is DeFi? What does Aave do? What do liquidity protocols do in DeFi? And then what are these? Where do security? Sorry, where do the real estate backed tokens fit in? So real estate backed tokens can be NFTs, non fungibles, or they can be fractionalized into fungible tokens and so on from a pool of real estate assets or so on. So now, and there is obviously quite a bit of regulatory implication of doing all of this, and that's what makes so what makes real world assets interesting is not the technology, it's really the law and the differences across borders. So crypto is a very unique market in the sense that if you have Bitcoin in your wallet, then if you have the private keys to the Bitcoin, then it's your Bitcoin, right? So property rights are oversimplified in the crypto world. Not your keys, not your crypto, but your keys, then typically your crypto, right? Unless crime is involved. So whereas that's not how real world assets work. When we think about real estate tokens, then there is a system of record. Essentially, the land registry maintains an official system of record. It's not blockchain native. It's typically a lot of paper inside the canton of Zug, or and that's maintained in a database in whether it's a canton or Zug or London, whatever. So essentially, the master record is not sitting with. So the first issue is that master record is not sitting with on the blockchain, right? It's not like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin are minted on the blockchain and they're native to the blockchain. So the system of record is elsewhere, and therefore what you see on the blockchain is already a copy. And in case of a dispute, typically it's not guaranteed that the copy on the blockchain will be held as the authentic copy. It's quite possible that if this real estate token ends up in the hands of a wallet of in a different country, then the courts will still rule that the underlying real estate is not owned by this guy in China, but it's still owned by the guy in Switzerland, right? So as soon as you get into real world assets, the first thing that happens is courts get involved. So the second thing happens is the system of record is not on the blockchain, right? So that creates a lot of complexity. So real estate tokens and DeFi and crypto are internet first, right? So when you think about crypto, it's internet native, it's global, it's on the internet, and that's not how property works. So property is laws, property rights, property laws are very local. Courts in different jurisdictions, even within the same country. I mean, it's not guaranteed that Zug and Wad will agree on the same definition of property rights, although in a nation that's typically the case. But even in the US, for example, different states might differ on interpretation of property rights for the same land title and so on. So there is a lot of interesting case law, which I'm not a lawyer, so I'm probably not the best person. I think I got disconnected. Yeah. So I think that the important thing is to know that that in case of property and sorry, my connection may be interrupted. Try to reconnect. Am I connected, Mete?
Yes, you can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. So I'm getting some really good questions from Bjorn, and so I'm going to take them one by one. That makes this talk very interesting. So let's Yes, so I think that the tech is the easy part when it comes to property tokens, and we have done some experimentation with realty, with real estate backed tokens in Aave. But let's I think all the questions people are raising are exactly what you should be which we should be thinking about. So first of all, when are financial institutions going to become active in holding and trading digital real estate? I believe in some form or the other they do that already, right? So I mean, private equity. There is quite a bit of bad debt or commercial real estate. Even back in 2008 2009 when I was at Goldman, there was a bunch of property ownership of property shares in the form of REITs that was being traded in our trading systems in SecDB. There are also lots and lots of property derivatives that were being traded in sort of electronic systems. So none of that has not all of that necessarily requires a blockchain or tokenization. So that's the first thing. So financial institutions are already active, but tokenization by creating programmable assets creates a bunch of automation and efficiency and transparency, which is really valuable. So that's the first question. DeFi and compliance. Many of our peers are all located in Switzerland in some shape or form. Yes, in fact, Switzerland has always been the hotbed of crypto innovation. Consensus was founded in Zug. Tezos is based there. Lots and lots of Stani from our CEO lived there for a while. So Switzerland is a great place for crypto innovation, and even now the level of institutional participation in Aave and DeFi in Switzerland is truly encouraging, and I totally love it. So security tokens, there has been a lot of experimentation and innovation in Switzerland as well in this space. And what happened is that primary market liquidity issuance was easy, right? Everyone issued a lot of tokens. But secondary market liquidity for real estate tokens has been hard, or secondary market liquidity for all security tokens has been hard to get because there are lots of again existing systems and laws around who can custody these assets, how these assets will be serviced. So for example, if you hold a real estate token and the underlying property essentially has an income stream, then how do you actually deliver the real world cash that you collect from the property in a bank account onto the blockchain? So there is a role for custodians and asset servicers, which makes the value chain for real estate tokens quite similar to securities in the real world. And not all of the custodians, the traditional custodians and CSDs, for example, in the case of other securities, have taken a lot of active interest in sort of creating this new digital market. But in Switzerland, I've seen a lot more of innovation than in most other countries. So so security tokens and providing liquidity. So is there a way to connect the different KYC ML layers? Yep. So there are innovators like Shift Markets, right, who are essentially sourcing KYC data from exchanges, crypto exchanges and elsewhere, and with user consent and all of those privacy relevant concepts. So yes, there is a way to and I think even a country should essentially create KYC utilities or national identity systems that also enable KYC for financial institutions, like they do in India right now. So you can have an Aadhaar ID, or in Dubai if you have an Emirates ID, then you can do a whole bunch of things with that Emirates ID, right? So I think that digital identity is the first step, and tying that to KYC is the second step. So that sort of digital utility hasn't really been created in most Western jurisdictions, in spite of 5 years of effort. Which, in fact, effort has all come from engineers, none from the lawyers and regulators. So I think there is a big opportunity there. And once there is this type of digital identity system, at least within the same jurisdiction like Switzerland, you can make a lot of these digital assets very transferable across, different blockchains or even non-blockchain databases and so on, and therefore I think make the property rights far more auditable and enforceable. So there is a lot of scope for innovation in digital utilities like KYC utilities, but that's more a matter of sort of getting the policy institutions, and it's there is a role for government getting involved. So that's not a technical problem. That's all about policy, law, governance, and essentially just convincing the policy institutions to actually spend money productively on digital technology. Now, defined compliance. Yep. So, isn't there a transfer tax in many countries? Thank you for mentioning this. Yeah, there is absolutely there are transfer. There are various taxation rules, and they are very. There's sometimes different interstate in the U.S. They're definitely different between European countries. So, yep, most states in the US do charge a transfer tax for exchanging members of LLCs that own a real estate, and that's coming to that sort of thinking is coming to crypto as well, right? So when you essentially sell one crypto for another, that like kind transaction or asset to asset transaction is now becoming taxable. If there is a hard fork on a blockchain, that's becoming taxable. So the US tax code is as big as any other book you would have ever have read. So again, this is not a technology issue. As technologists, I think we can totally build whatever needs to be built. But there is like 50, 60 years of history and tax law, and the refinement, or actually making the tax code more and more messy to please this political constituency or that political constituency. Of there's all this deal making in amongst politicians that's led to a really complex tax code in most countries, and that's not something engineers can solve. So what engineers are doing is they're creating these internet native global markets on crypto, and then showing just a better way to regulators and and policymakers, saying, look, it's possible to create far more efficient global liquid digital asset markets, and maybe all of this technology should be used elsewhere. So Aave had to. It's not margin calls. So Bjorn, Aave had to handle. I mean, Aave doesn't. Aave is fully automated. It's a bunch of smart contracts. So what happens is when prices crash on collateral precipitously as they did today, then and let's say if a user's loan to value ratio falls below the minimum LTV for Bitcoin. So it's like 85%. If you borrow, let's say you had $100 of Bitcoin, you borrowed $80 worth of USDC, and now your Bitcoin dropped to $90, so your LTV now is higher than 85%. So yeah, so then your Bitcoin or your collateral becomes eligible for what we call liquidation, right? And essentially to recapitalize the pool and make sure the pool is in overall is solvent and in good health. Market participants can buy this collateral for at a discount. So you can essentially pay $91.5 for $95 of Bitcoin, and essentially that USDC, or that is asset is added back to the pool, and therefore the asset, the pool remains solvent. So Aave, as a liquidity pool, retains its health using this liquidation mechanism. So yeah, there have been, with a crash like 40-50%, yeah, there are liquidations. Now, in the case of real world assets, this is very interesting because real world assets rely on paper contracts still, right? So so what happens if a real estate backed token is liquidated, right? So let's say this token represents some nice real estate in Lausanne, where I went to college, and right, in business school, and now that piece of real estate essentially is now owned by some guy, some market maker in let's say France. Now, will the courts still honor the ownership of that token as the ownership of the underlying asset? We don't really know. So I think there is not enough legal precedent. So liquidation creates a bit of an interesting challenge. But liquidations, are a bit like how mortgages, when you can't pay your mortgage, the banks essentially forecloses your house. So liquidations are kind of similar mechanisms. So we see that in the real world. It's a matter of making sure that if there are known market participants in an Aave like liquidity pool that has real estate tokens as collateral, then there are legal contracts and terms and conditions backing the participation of market participants. Right, you create a pool in Aave that contains these types of tokens. Then you need to make sure that you have the terms and conditions and the master agreements where users sign up and say, look, when I'm signing up for this, then I'm also signing up for the liquidation mechanism. And if my real estate tokens get collateral, then here is a contract that says, I will honor this, right? And I will not go to court and sue this guy because he just, rightfully liquidated my assets. So that's that. So there is there's a lot of work for lawyers here, which is quite truly interesting. How interesting is it for crypto investors to get access to real estate backed tokens? It's very interesting. So, with tokens, the promise has always been liquidity, first of all. So, and global liquidity, right? So, with sort of public blockchains like Ethereum, I can, suppose I want access to real estate in Nevada right now, or in Lausanne, because I went to college there. I like that place. So now there is no way. I mean, there's no easy way for me to do that without calling five lawyers. I mean, it's just complicated right now. So there's a lot of paperwork and whatnot. So if there is the right sort of legal precedent and the body of law and the right contracts in place, then if I can buy a token that's backed by, if I'm bullish on real estate in Lausanne, then I can buy that on hopefully on a crypto exchange, or at least on a securities token exchange remotely, by KYCing myself and signing up to the terms and conditions and all of that. So that sort of gives that connects this. So right now capital is not free, right? So capital is not free to move across borders. So which means it does move, but it only moves through banks, and it only moves really slowly when you and it's not always efficient how capital moves. So now this allows my capital to essentially move to Lausanne, and the property in Lausanne to essentially move to my wallet. So I think that sort of global liquidity is truly powerful and will create a lot of market efficiencies cross border. Now, so the value is enormous. Obviously, there's a lot of law. How do you value the underlying assets to lend on it? You deposit into the pool. If you want to use Aave, you create a pool, you deposit those tokens into the pool, you're done, right? Now, when somebody borrows that asset, then you will start getting paid an interest, right? So yeah, oracles play a role. Oracles are very important. So this is another challenge. Real estate tokens are highly liquid. Because the underlying real estate is a liquid. Not always, but most real estate tokens are illiquid because real estate is very unique. There is usually not a lot of information on what's going on. If I have a house in London, then unless I have a drone circling it and capturing images to see what condition the property is in, it's impossible to curate and value that property at any given time. So having reliable price data is really hard, which makes pricing very hard, which makes using it in DeFi incredibly hard. So if you don't have quality sources of information and pricing, then we get into the situation like the 2008 2009 mortgage crisis, where nobody really knew what all those houses were worth, and everyone was pricing them up 5 or 6 times, and there was a whole stack of financial instruments built on it. And when people realized that the properties were highly correlated and the underlying assets weren't actually worth that much, then the whole thing it's a bit like the Shiba Inu coin situation right now. So I think data is again a very, very important part of the problem. And when so the blockchain, people, we talk a lot about blockchain and tokens. We don't talk about the information infrastructure that's required to deliver accurate pricing and liquidity and market efficiency in markets. So it's possible in crypto because everything is on chain. Everything is out there, and but it's not it's not that straightforward with real estate tokens, but it's possible. Someone concerned about decoupling of risk analysis and investment inflow risk analysis. Actually, I don't fully understand the question, but I'll take a guess. So uh, there's no real decoupling of risk analysis and investment inflow. In fact, quite the other way around. It's everything is market driven. So you don't have five guys operating and approving things and pressing a button. Everything is efficient and automated. I know your question is perfectly fine, but I think it's important to understand that in a system like Aave, everything is driven by market information and market data and automated smart contracts. So you kind of can guess what's going to happen, right? So you can even run simulations that say Bitcoin dropped 40% like it did today. Then we ran a bunch of stress tests to make sure that Aave will remain solvent, will remain strong, and Aave has proven itself, right? So yes, there are liquidations, but the system works. So market crashed, Aave is still running robustly, it's running beautifully. So so I think that sort of stress testing is possible because my data is available. Now, Southeast Asian region, I really don't know anything about the Southeast Asian region. Uh, Again, I'm not a real estate expert. I'm a DeFi and technology expert. So, yeah, I can't answer that question. Unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge. Custody solutions related to tokenization of pre-existing assets, absolutely. So again, right, you need custodians. As soon as you get into the real world assets, you need custodians because you need asset servicing. So and asset servicing is really important, right? So I mean, what is that house worth? I mean, do we need to do any upkeep of that property, and then who pays for it? If there is a rental income, how do you transfer the real income through the bank accounts into the and how do you sort of bring that as a stable coin on the blockchain and pay the right person? Because as soon as you go away from crypto native assets, you have to deal with asset servicing. If you haven't dealt with asset servicing, then tokenization is not going to do a lot for you. If I'm not a tax lawyer, fortunately. I have a far more interesting role, but yeah, tax law is really important. Can't answer that question. Do you think real estate tokens will have more of a structured product nature? I think liquidity is really important. And liquidity comes from information efficiency, and the technical efficiencies of blockchain are talked about a lot. But where we don't really invest a lot of time is in sourcing, and in the real estate token world, is in making sure that there is high quality data, there is curation of assets, there is if the real estate is trash underlying a real estate token, then it doesn't matter what the token does, right? There's not going to be much demand for it. So the underlying property and the information and the visibility around it's like selling paintings, right? So NFTs. That's why I talked about NFTs in the beginning. If you're selling paintings that are not worth a lot, you might get a few dollars in a bull market. But as soon as that kind of market settles down, people will still want to buy a Picasso. So, which is why if you're going to sell real estate tokens in Texas, and a lot of people tried that, then the question is, how do you keep the users informed as to what that property really is and how to price it, right? And these are very idiosyncratic assets. So a pool or a basket, both are perfect. Yeah, absolutely. A basket makes a lot of sense. But then, what's in the basket? I think when you're dealing with that inside, private equity or sort of financial institutions, then you have specialists who can, value these assets, or at least take a haircut on those, and you have a team of financial controllers who can take sort of do a valuation discount or valuation adjustment on whatever these assets are worth. If you're going to do that in a highly automated system, then you might as well, provide a lot of information through oracles and data tools on chain, so that the system can be automated. And I'll keep repeating this for a couple of times, that people spend a lot of time on creating tokens. They don't spend enough time on creating the underlying information, infrastructure, and quality information, so that informed buyers can price these assets. So that's really important. One last question, and Mete, please stop me when I'm running off the clock. One of the is to create liquidity. Yeah, liquidity, again, I've said this all out. So liquidity doesn't happen just because there are tokens. I wrote a really long article on this in 2018. So liquidity happens because people are aware of what they're buying, and they can make informed decisions about buying and selling, right? So price data is one element of that, but the underlying valuation of the asset. So large caps are more liquid than small caps for a reason, right? So, and that's really about the information that's available. And public stocks are more valuable than private stocks because more people know more about public companies than about private companies. So information drives liquidity, not tokens. So tokens help because you have this internet infrastructure for transferring assets very efficiently. That's probably 20-30% of the liquidity. The other 80% and 70% comes from information efficiencies. So
all
that's
right.
sorry, I'll
I'm
keep
sorry, we are out of time. We
Yeah.
are out of time. You went through so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Was fantastic. I think that there were actually still some questions that people really like to have answers. Do you have a social media handle, or where can people contact you?
Yeah. So if you want to be thoroughly entertained, I'm on Queen Yoda on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm on LinkedIn.com in Ajit KT, and everyone should essentially get a MetaMask wallet and use Aave.com. You can
Good. Yeah, so Ajit's info is now in the chat section, so everybody can just copy that. Thank you very much, Ajit.
Thank you so much.
Next coming up is the